And welcome to another exciting episode of Riding Through the Unknown. I'm your host, Michael. And before I introduce my guest, I need to give a shout out to my cousin who created that intro brand new for this show. And so, thank you, cousin, for that intro and outro, which you will see later. With that housekeeping done, I am proud and blessed to bring you all a really awesome guest who has information I think you all will enjoy hearing. So, without any more delay, I give you Tony Rodrigues.
Hi, Michael. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Well, thank you for coming. And I like to point out with transparency in this day and age that this is the first time you and I have talked face to face. And so I feel special that you were willing to come on and take a chance with my show.
No, I don't mind it at all. These are, I, at the end of the day, I feel that it's very important for what happened to me, the things that I remember going through, and the things that have panned out. I think it's important information. Uh, But that's the bottom line. I just think it's important to share with people. What people do with it individually is up to them. But I think for the most part, where people are not aware that what happened to me is possible. And so I'll go on any show. Anybody that asks, I'm not afraid to talk about this. I've taken my lumps. I've been criticized uh, more so in the last year than in the last seven. But it doesn't change anything. So I'm not being deceptive, and my testimony is something I didn't want to take to the grave. So it's true. I've only met you a few minutes now, but I'm very happy to have you on here, and you've been great to me thus far. So
Well, thank you. And I also want to do a little housekeeping of we are starting about 10 minutes late because we had a little bit of issue with the login, but we got that figured out. So
that was my fault. It was my tech diff, and I probably should have came 20 minutes earlier, and we would have sorted it. So I apologize.
that's all right. That's all part of doing live shows. So we're here now, and I will give you the floor to give you a chance to introduce yourself and your story to the listeners.
Oh, so I don't want try not to eat up a lot of time. Um, my name's Tony Rodrigues, and when I was young, taken. I had an abduction experience, and I was put into several black or underground covert programs with a technology that other people have come forward and said is a 20 and back or a 20-year tour or a career return program. And they basically took me. I was 10 years old, and I lived a life in these programs for 20 years, and then they put me back somehow. However, the technology works, we're starting to see some real credible research on like a reset switch in the human genome that can cause reverse aging. So, truth is, I really don't know how they did it. I have my guesses, but I lived for 20 years in black programs, and the first 6 years on Earth, and then sold into a secret space program, which is kind of a buzzword, and lived. And I woke up with these memories one day. I had a breakthrough event, and I got all the memories back. I had the memories all along, but they didn't make sense. And then one day, I kind of got the bulk of them. It was a huge avalanche in May of 2015, after I had an MRI scan on my head about 10 days before that, and then I stumbled across the Randy Kramer account, the Randy Kramer videos on exopolitics.org. And so, I mean, it was kind of a perfect storm. And I had always had memory of being abducted, of a basic ET abduction. So a lot of people do. So a lot of people have memories, and they have this. Man, I saw something. There was a gray in my room. The lights were flickering, and then I don't know what happened after that. I felt weird ever after. And it was the same thing for me. I had a gray ET in my room, and I was taken. I had no idea what happened, and I had all these weird flash bleed through memories throughout my life after that, and they didn't make sense. But when I saw the Randy Kramer interview, like I said, it may be coincidentally after an MRI that he explained that they take you for 20. They don't just take you many times. I thought I was taken many times. I had memories of being older, memories of being younger in the presence of ETs, and I thought that I was taken. I just didn't remember. And when he said they take you for 20 years and then they put you back, I went, oh God, that's what happened. Oh my God. And once I accepted that, it was like all the memories came. And over a period of the next 3 days, it was like giant chunks of memories. Um, I know that it doesn't make sense. I know that it's kind of a tall order to say that. But as I started to check out the things that I remembered, lo and behold, they were real places. I remembered living in Peru, living in Seattle, places that I had never been in my life that I can easily prove. And I had intimate knowledge. I knew my way around these places in Peru. I've still never been to Peru. I've never been to Peru, in my linear life, my organic life. And I know my way around the Puerto Tawantinsuyo or Boca, Colorado, Peru, quite well, and the history of it that's worked out. So, with that being said, I kind of turned over to researchers, and it took on a life of its own. And I said yes to one interview, which turned into another and another. And I've done hundreds of interviews, and I wrote 2 books. I got 2 books out. The series colony, the main account of all the memories is Series Colony Cavalier. So that's this book. And then I wrote a small sequel. It's a very thin book, it's much smaller, but a lot of questions that weren't answered in Series Colony Cavalier I wrote out, and it's Project Star Maker. It's a little bit more wooey, spiritual and wooey than Series Colony Cavalier, but that's basically the linear story. And uh, even before I wrote the book, when I was doing the interviews, many people, dozens of people, come forward and wanted to do interviews, and lots of people that are witnesses to the same thing, and even other. I don't want to say unbelievable. My account is unbelievable for someone that's really in the dark on what's going on. But it is believable when you add in the things I've discovered that I've got proof. The proofs I've added. But there are other even more unbelievable accounts that have come forward. And I've been fortunate that I'm somebody that has a linear account. Like I have a beginning, middle, and end of what happened to me. And a lot of people still have the fragmented memories. And so they don't know what happens next. They just know that this happened. And then sometime later, something else happened. That's our standard witness that's come forward nowadays. And there are literally thousands of them. There are thousands of people that come forward after seeing these shows, either me or others talking on a show, and they go, "Oh God, that's what happened to me too." It's a phenomenon. Um, so it's real, and the thing is, as tall, some of them are very unbelievable. I won't sugarcoat it. I look at it and I struggle to believe, but even with my memory of living up there, living on a colony in the solar system, working on base, essentially, I was a I was a maintenance guy on a craft for about 8 years, and then that craft was decommissioned, and I was promoted to cargo engineer. And I worked on a UFO that was based on the Ceres planetoid, CERES, in between Mars and the asteroid belt. And I lived there for about 12 years, and I worked on that. So even with those memories, there are other tales that have come forward that are kind of hard for me to believe, but that doesn't mean they're not real. So um, there's a real phenomenon that psychologists use, and that a buzzword, a buzz term that I've just been made aware of, that the professionals use when they talk about ufology, or people that have witnesses, whatever you want to call it, a whistleblower or a witness, and they say that people tend to bulldoze reality. So they think that there's a psychosis or something. Say, you see this, and then there's evidence that covers up or contradicts what a witness says back in the day. So even just as close as a few years ago, bulldozing reality was saying that you were in a craft that could go into orbit very quickly,
I
and
I know, and
and
we've
so
made
that was
uh,
bulldozing reality to say that you saw a craft that could turn a right angle and go into the water. So the psychologist would say, well, you're bulldozing reality because that's impossible. But that's come out and now is officially reality. So that's how it's changed. But so people, so when you say that you could breathe on Mars, I was on Mars and I could breathe. We had a suit and we had treatment, and we could breathe the air. So that people say you're bulldozing reality by making excuses, but the fact is that much of the accepted reality of science that they hold up against the existence of UFOs and extraterrestrials and the secret space program isn't concrete. So it's all science is subject to change upon discovery of new science, scientific fact. So I think I covered a lot. Do you have any questions, Michael, at this point?
Well, one that I'd like to point out that makes your story a little more unique than a lot of them that I've had on the show so far is the phrase you used the term sold. And so I want to make sure people understand what you mean when you say sold and don't misunderstand.
Absolutely. I was slave labor. I was a piece of equipment. When I was taken into this program, this was not a kumbaya. This was a full-on military project that was compartmentalized, and what I would be owned privately by somebody that had access to these compartments in the beginning, and put through a military program that was an offshoot of an existing program. So like a military contractor, and then sold to a program. And when I was no good at what I was doing, I was sold to another one, or went back. One time I defaulted back to my owner. But when I was put into space, in the space program, it was the same thing. I was in a program, a military program on Mars, and then when that was canceled, they retrained me. Excuse me. They reassessed me and they retrained me for a new job, and then I was sold to the Ceres colony, and that's where I stayed for the bulk of my time. But absolutely, I was slave labor. I had no. I did have freedom to move around, but I was treated like a slave. I was a slave, um, for lack of a better term. So that was a reality, and it's something that I'm not the only testimony, but most people that are taken into the programs are trained. Most people that have their memories are trained at a young age for a specific task or two tasks that they qualify for. So they go up and they're a soldier or a doctor or an engineer or a scientist. And so it's slavery to say. Most of them get promised a paycheck when it's all over with. When we're done and you go back to Earth, we're going to give you $250,000, and they don't get anything. They get their memories deleted. So they don't even remember that there's a debt, and they're put back the same day. I was taken on a Thursday night. I woke up in my bedroom the Friday morning, the next morning. I was only gone, a matter of minutes total, maybe an hour or two tops. And I woke up the next morning a completely different person. I was a 10-year-old, but I had the sensation of having been gone for 20 years. I ran down and hugged my mom and my dad and my sister, and I couldn't believe it that I was back in my life. And I had great memory lapses. I was very, it was awkward, put it that way. So yeah, absolutely. I was slave labor. I wasn't somebody that was a professional up there. I was slave labor, and I ended up going to doing jobs that I was qualified for.
And so what's unique too about that is this what I heard you talk at the GSIC conference in October. I believe it was you that mentioned this happened to you at 2. And I remembered an incident when I was 2, and I was like, it started me going down a rabbit hole of.
I don't think it was me. So it was 10 for me. So
Oh, it was 10?
Yeah, I don't think anything happened to me at 2 years old. So it wasn't me.
But I think, well, in either case, I remember coming home and sitting in the car with Alex and talking to my parents when I got home and going, after hearing Tony's talk, I feel like I did a 20 and back. And everybody looked and said, I think you did.
So it's common that the thing is, most people that even watch any of these shows, ufology, have already had something that happened to them or witnessed something that shouldn't have happened in the standard construct of society, what we live in, what we've been presented with, that we're people, that's it, you can't go anywhere. And people see things. When you witness something, then they start researching it. Nobody really had any context that there was a time travel component, that there was a medical component, that there's actually technology. It's actually coming to the mainstream now. There is an article, I think Dr. Michael Salla shared an article recently where theoretically possible to switch a genome in the human genome and flick a switch, and we reverse age X amount of years. And so the science is there. It sounds very, very, very far fetched, but it's real. But there's a reality to it. And so people are unaware that the fact, like I said, I had all these memories that didn't make sense. I knew I was abducted. I always remembered the first 30 minutes of the abduction. I remember seeing an ET in my room, a reptilian ET and a gray ET. And I always remembered that. But what do you do with that? What good is just a 20-minute memory of being with an ET? Most people are told they're special, you're chosen, we're here to save the world, and go to sleep, and that's it. And so they have this feeling, they have no idea, a vague, fuzzy. There's no memory of what happened. And for whatever reason that I got my memories back, when I did, I remembered the entire scope of it was that humans have broken away from the Earth's established colonies and are doing business in on a galactic scale, like in space. So there is infrastructure. There are many colonies in our solar system with humans from Earth. People are taken out of prison. People are taken out of bed. They're trained. There is a certain genetic component, and then people are put back, and you don't get your memories back. Um, so this is something that's new. So now that this information has come out, people look at it and go, "Wait a minute, that's what happened to me too." And it starts to connect dots that were always there. That you just, there's no real context. Hollywood hides it. We see misinformation. And when you start looking at it, you go, "Man, they've always been saying the wrong thing the whole time." Back into the 30s and 40s, media and science fiction has been programming us to think a certain way. The the big points that I always like to mention that, um, from what I remember, from what the lifestyle was that there isn't a particularly always good and always evil race out there. It's about compatibility and what their perspective is and what their goals are. So, for one, and for two, uh, space is very close. It's very close by. So we're told in all of our, in Star Wars and Star Trek, it's like warp 9 for 8 hours to that star that we're going to. It wasn't like that. We could leave. We bridge. So the same word that we use in sci-fi, they call it jumping, right? Like a spaceship
Right.
can jump into another. They called it a bridging. And so we could bridge to another star system and be back at the same time. We even came back slightly before we left so that they could visually see that the mission was a success. And if we didn't come back to the right place or didn't come back on time, they would scrub the mission and there'd be no loss. So they could schedule aggressive missions, anti-telephoning missions. Um, but we could jump instantly to very far away. And some places to go farther, we'd jump and then wait a few 15 minutes and jump again, bridge and bridge. So, um,
Are
and
these
then
bridges like the Einstein-Rosen bridge?
exactly, that's exactly
Okay.
right. The ships could create their own, and with the access of natural ones, so there are natural phenomenon that are basically an Einstein Rose. It's a different phenomenon, but they could use a natural one, and there is one out by Jupiter in the area of Jupiter. They could use a natural bridge and go to other galaxies, go very far away, where the ship could bridge based on its power output. So for us to go to the other side of our galaxy was 2 or 3 jumps. I'll just call them jumps from now on. It was 2 or 3 times stops, but then we could come back. It was almost instant, to go to another galaxy. We could go to the nearest like 18 galaxies through the one around Jupiter. So we could go into that and they had to purchase the computer equations. They didn't have the ability. The Ceres Colony Corporation at the time that I was there did not have the computing power to use the natural portal that's around Jupiter. They had to purchase the computer equations from an ET race at a space station nearby. And so there's actually quite a bit of traffic and there's quite a bit of infrastructure in our solar system. And, the astronomers, bless their hearts, just don't have that technology yet to see them. And all of the main uh, big telescopes in the world have digital cameras and the computers block out any traffic anyway. So I'm seeing questions come up. They're great. Um,
Yes.
So from what I remember, Andy, I'm seeing that we have craft that can get to the moon very quickly in an hour or two, and they go quite often, daily trips to the moon. There are bases that are very active on the backside of the moon. And I was in my first trip to the moon, I think, was in 1982, end of 82. So that's how, and that was a craft that came down at the Inyo Kern Airport, picked us up, and flew us directly there. I don't think they used any kind of bridge or portal to get there. When they went to Mars, it was a different story. But I don't remember too much about that trip. It's like they make you go to sleep. So the Mars colony in general had a technology where they could make you go to sleep, like a Bluetooth. Like imagine a Bluetooth speaker they could put in your room, and they turn it on, and everybody goes to sleep. And so they had that on the craft to fly out there. You slept on the way.
Yeah.
Um,
One thing I'd like to ask your perspective on with the moon is NASA sold us we can't communicate with space shuttles on the dark side of the moon because of it being a sphere. Yet the Earth is a sphere and we can communicate everywhere. So how did they sell us? We
so
can't.
right, so they do have cables. So they back in the I don't know when, but it was early 19th or 1800s, late 1800s or early 19th. They laid transatlantic cable and trans-Pacific cable, I believe, for telegrams.
Right.
But we have satellites that do the instant communication. So when you think about a sphere, we communicate to a satellite that communicates to another one that communicates to the people down here. There's only the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter is the only communication satellite that I'm aware of. There's probably more, but if they put a constellation of satellites around the moon, then they can communicate easily. During the moon shots, obviously they didn't have satellites around the moon at the time, at least as they're telling us to. The I believe that the moon itself is a finish line in an ET treaty, in a treatise. So um, many different species that belong to many different groups that all operate in space alongside each other, and they have a treaty saying not to go down to the Earth, or if you go to the Earth, it's only this kind of traffic that is allowed to go there. You guys just can't freely walk around. We have folk tales of the boogeyman and giant lizards. We have folk tales all throughout our history of basically, if you looked at, could be ET encounters, and then they stopped all of a sudden. So it's like there's a treaty, and they're letting us develop on our own. Um, but it looks like when you get to the moon, now you have access to that club inside the treaty. You become a member. So I believe that the Germans made it there, and that's a whole story about it back in you know, after World War One and right at the beginning of World War II, that they acquired anti-grav technology, and in fact, that was a lot of the motivator about what World War II was about. So they went to the moon, and once they crossed the finish line, now they can do business with these species that are up there. And then the other governments found out. World War II happened. Russia and the United States got the technology, and the United States was in a race. There was a race to go to the moon. The United States got there, and then we got a secret space program. And once we got to the backside of the moon, we could do business there. It's a finish line. And this is my personal opinion. That's nothing more. Um, so I'm hoping that if a private company goes to the moon, that it speaks for all of us, and we get disclosure. Like there's a finish line for mankind, like we made it on our own. And I think that that's something along the lines of what could happen. So I'm hoping.
Right. And the second part of that question is the fact that the dark side of the moon is always facing away from us, yet we're a sphere moving and we have one face in front of the sun, then another face in front of the sun. How do they keep
So
without it being a
tidal
object?
lock doesn't make a lot of sense. Tidal lock, and there are other moons in this. Not all of them, but there are other moons in the solar system that have tidal lock as well. I believe one of the Mars ones does. Not all of them, so it doesn't make sense to me. Like I think about the physics, but I'm not a big math guy. But it is sure is convenient if you're going to have a bunch of bases you don't want the populace to see, to have a
Right.
moon that doesn't turn around, that doesn't that turns and faces the Earth the entire time. It's counterintuitive. It seems like it's not something that would happen. So the math behind it is complex, and it's just not something that I'm privy of. But it doesn't make sense to me that there's tidal lock of the moon. It really doesn't. And most people, if they're unaware of it, when they do learn about tidal lock and what that does, they go, "Wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense." It would. The thing is, if you're going to put bases on the backside of the moon, that that can do business. You got to think the moon is also blocking all of the radar and all, so you can have giant ships fly up to the moon. You can do all kinds of things and fly away, and it's a perfect blind for for many species to operate close to Earth. So, but most people, when they think about it, tidal lock, they totally don't believe that that's real, but it is. It's some of the same. The moon faces the Earth the same time. Let's see Andy's other question. I want to say something. Is there enough oxygen to survive on other planets? Not on the surface. So I remember breathing on Mars. I believe, when I look back on it, I believe there was an implant that they put in us that helped us breathe in the Mars environment. But I remember breathing there. So that's a big. It's a big hurdle in my testimony against somebody that's a pure skeptic. They go, "Well, that doesn't make any sense because we've got all this data from NASA, from the same people that have flown around the moon that say there's nothing back there. We have all this data from NASA that says the air is made up of this, but really, I mean, that's what I remember, so I stick to it. So other whistleblowers that come forward said the same thing. So that, as far as that's concerned, I think it was done with an implant. But I also do remember, outside of the solar system, we did trade missions. I was a cargo engineer the last 2.5 years. I was up there, and I was privy to seeing where the mission was and actually setting foot on other worlds. And we did business with a lot of other worlds that had trees and rain and snow and deserts. It's same like Earth. There are many. An Earth-like planet is very common. Or there are many. They're numerous. Put it that way. I don't know what common, but they're very numerous.
So, what kind of races did you come across while you were doing your cargo days?
That's a popular question. So there were all kinds, really. A lot of human races. There were reptilians. There were humans that were blue. There were humans that were much taller. There were humans that had oblong heads. There were races that looked a lot like us and they had different sized features, eyes or nose, and they would have different distances. Like they would have a longer arm and a shorter, whatever that is, bicep. And there were reptilians, there were insectoids, there were grays. There was a race that we went to in our galaxy that was like a cross between a human and a rodent that looked like a rat that was about 4 feet tall, and it had a human looking face but like with whiskers, and it looked like a rat, but it was smart, and I liked him. I thought he was a good guy, and so there's quite a bit out there. There's quite a bit. Nature extends beyond the sky, and there's a lot of it. It's more of a jungle than a neighborhood up there, I guess.
Right. And so that actually led to my next question. I was to say was, of all the races you met, were there ones that you were like, oh man, I'm so glad we're getting to go see these guys again because I can go see my friend?
There was a species, I don't remember their name, but they were like humans. They were tended to be beautiful, and they were light blue colored. Their skin was blue, and they lived longer. And because of it, they I guess they had psychic abilities too. They were an advanced race. Then they lived much longer than all of the other. So we live really short lives compared to um, most of the spacefaring species that are up there. They've been working on life extension with the advanced technology for a long time, and it looks like like our leadership actually wants us to live shorter lives than what we do. But this particular species were beautiful, and we would always joke about them. They were xenophobic. They didn't want their genetics to be polluted, so they didn't allow interspecies mingling. So many species, and this is kind of tread lightly subject, but many species are sexually compatible, even though they look nothing alike. So there is interspecies sexuality on our level of development, on our level of intelligence. And so it was again, it's absolutely taboo for this species to mate with. So we would always joke about that. We're going to go see when I'm going to pick up one of their girls. Like that was the guys in the cargo bay. We would always be joking about it. We're going to go to them. We're going to do business with these.
Right. Guys being guys.
It was guys being guys, and we're going to pick up one of their girls. So that was fun to do. But for the most part, I was just moving boxes. I stayed in the cargo bay. Sometimes I had to go down and sign a manifest or be a witness on something. We called it the spider. It was a lift that had 8 cables that would lower us down onto the, outside. The ship would come in low, and then we'd ride a little elevator down onto the. And sometimes I went down and I had something that somebody could sign. I would meet some people. For the most part, I stayed at my workstation when we took on cargo. I would go down and just look at where it's at and tell the guys where to put it. The guys did measurements for me and gave me a report, and then I did the data entry. That was basically my job.
So I'm kind of curious, did you ever get like what we in military terms call shore leave, where you get to go somewhere and just walk around freely?
Not per se me. So again, I was slave labor, so I was not ranked. I was just under rank. So there was I was considered a civilian, like a contractor, but that wasn't what I was considered. But there's a ranking for that. Like there's an entire rank system before you're ranked and entered into the service on Ceres Colony. And I'm trying to think of the way to put this. I was ranked right above the guys in the cargo bay, so I had got a little. So the people that were enlisted, the bridge crew specifically, the media officer, there was a team that would go on to when we went to Worlds to negotiate, not in space. There was a team that would go in and do that. They would do an away thing, but no, I never had leave on another world. I did have time in the Ceres Colony. I could come and go. When I got to the point where when I was cargo engineer, they voted and they gave me an allowance, like $20, $20 to $40 a week in dollars terms. They called them francs. They had their own money there. But when that happened, I could buy a train ticket and I was free to roam about the colony. And so I did go out, and there was a red light district, and I spent actually most of my time there. It's a long story. It's in the book how it all worked out. It was like a series of events, and there was a business there, like a bar, and he had girls that worked there. It was a red light district club, and the owner was an ET. Was like a 9-foot tall, curly haired, long skull, black eyes. He looked like a human, but he had wide hips. He was like 9 feet tall. He was the owner of the place. And he could see where he sat in his cubicle. He had like a cubicle that he sat in. He could see the whole place except for right by the door. So where the door came in, there was a table behind it, and a girl got assaulted there and was hurt very badly, and he couldn't see it, do anything about it. And whatever, my contact, it's a long story how I got into contact with him, but he said that I could sit there and just be a placeholder on that table that he couldn't see. I could sit there so that people wouldn't sit there because he knew that I wasn't dangerous. And if the place filled up, then I had to leave. But it gave me somewhere to go. And then I was okay with that because if I went back to the barracks and had idle time, they'd put me to work. So it made more sense for me to go there and just look at pretty girls and do nothing than go back to the barracks and end up doing laundry for 5,000 guys. And that was kind of the last couple of days when I did have freedom like that was the time when I felt more like a person than a victim of what was going on. It was a very lonely, very emotionally cold existence, kind of like being in prison or in the military. I don't want to down the military, but you get what I mean by this.
Right.
It wasn't warm and fuzzy. So.
Right. And Andy does have another question, but we covered that in the beginning. So I'll just sum it up. Andy that he was taken and he was also sold into the program.
So
So,
I'll touch on this that I went to school with somebody. I was in a talented and gifted program in the early 80s, 82. And I went to school with a kid who came to my school and said his dad was an Illuminati. What's your dad do? That's what he said to me. What's your dad do? My dad's an Illuminati. And we didn't get along. And we met in the talented and gifted class every Wednesday in the library. And every week it was like we never got along. And his dad came in and was the judge for the science fair in April of that year. And he pointed me out, Dad, that's that boy I told you about. And that was on a Wednesday. And I was taken that Thursday. The next day was when ET showed up. So I was put in that program as a punishment. I was a cocky kid, and I sure lost a lot of that when I got back.
so I'm kind of curious when you got back, did do you ever have to repeat, or they view you paid your part and that's it, you're done?
I think that there's a lot of things that happened politically with me, especially the way that it worked out at the end of my service up there. I was demoted. There was an incident, and I think that the captain of my craft that I was on had my long-term records deleted, either for security or as a favor. I really don't know what motivated him to do it, but because of that, it was very fortuitous. I was able to come back and retain my memories and not be punished, or like if I had my records in place and I came back and retained my memories, then they could look me up and say, well, this is what he goes. Now we're going to get rid of him. So so now I got my memories back, and they look and my records aren't there, and they go, well, we can't, whatever, he's not on record, so just leave him be. And I think that's what's gone on. That's why I'm talking about it. And I've had a few weird things. I think that um, I'm still a participant in a satellite program, and I think because of once they get you and find out that you have the genetics for the technology, it takes, like, not everybody can go. There is a genetic barrier. So once they find out you have the genetics, they keep an eye on you to see if your children are going to be ideal. And I believe that. I believe that my children are eligible, and I actually believe that my one daughter went again. Um, but no, I haven't had any uh, second stints up there, as far as I know.
Which that brings up an interesting point when you say has the genome for it, because one of the commonalities that I've been hearing from a lot of the whistleblowers is the military. They're always attached to military, and my dad, was in the Navy. And so, I mean, it's like when you hear all these pieces, it's like it really starts to paint a picture of maybe. And I kind of wonder, like we were talking earlier about Hollywood with the disinformation. Do you think that's why they put out all these shows like Star Trek, where there's no currency? But then
Absolutely.
you hear the Ferengi are like, no, we want gold pressed latinum, which is currency. It's like, wait, is there no currency or is there currency?
There is both. Well, I remember we traded for technology, period. So there were species that came on and visited Ceres Colony that had no money. And
Sorry,
the
it's
guys,
rolling by.
they had no money. They came from a place that didn't generate currency. They came from a system that didn't have money, and they tended to not be wasteful. So they were given an account that was they were given basically a free credit card that they could move around, buy train tickets and food and such. But they had to trade something for it. So there was a diplomatic arrangement. But our mission, the ship that we were on, that we were trading goods, wasn't for currency. It was for technology. Our mission was to acquire advanced technology under all any means necessary to trade goods for tech, or tech for tech, or whatever it was. It was a very, very aggressive search for technology. And they would switch, that would then become currency inside the colony. The colony had its own currency. So the disinfo is very real. Hollywood is in on it, absolutely. Not everybody, I believe. Maybe some of the higher up writers and maybe some of the special effects companies, but they do that because that's the very first thing that any skeptic says. That's when I came out and I talked about the bugs on Mars, that we did combat missions and we were dealing with large insectoids on Mars. The first thing everybody says was, "Oh, you saw Starship Troopers."
Right.
So they go, "Okay, forget it." So there was a short time. So from 2015 till about 2017, there was a short time in there where people like me and others were coming out with um, credible overlap of our testimonies of things that were going on that were not in any movies. We were ahead of Hollywood for a while, and then the COVID shut down. But now Hollywood is coming out with time travel and multiverse is everywhere now. Now there's other dimensions,
Right.
so they're starting to catch up with what's going on with the disclosure of whistleblowers. Um,
I'm curious too if you ever saw the series Stargate SG-1.
yeah, I loved it. It was a great show.
Yeah, how they had the Black Ops unit that was working for the quote cabal that was
Mm.
going out. So it's stealing the tech, and then SG-1 had to go in and put an end to it.
Absolutely. So yeah, no, absolutely. That was so. There are military organizations that don't. We stole. So the ship that I was on, I don't want to say routinely, but on occasion would steal from ETs and from other colonies in the solar system. We were banned in certain airspace. We were banned from flying around Saturn or Venus or Pluto. There were places we couldn't fly because they were full aware that we were a colony that would steal from them. So we, like I said, they were very aggressive. It was by any means necessary to acquire advanced technology by any means necessary. That was our ship's mission. That was the mandate. And because it's that valuable, because one or two things, there's a very real competition. There were individually governed colonies: Mars Colony Corp, Ceres Colony Corp, Europa Colony Corp, etc. Um, these colony corporations are kind of autonomous that work under an umbrella corporation, like a main corporation, and they all kind of trade with each other. And the bragging rights or the access of technology gave them pecking order. So the ones that were more advanced technologically kind of had say in what goes on. And so that was the race. They were absolutely desperate for technology.
Well, Andy's got a really interesting question here. Do you know if or what the connection is between the ETs and the paranormal activity on Earth?
I believe that on the moon, that there are extraterrestrials that are very powerful psychically that patrol like remote viewingly patrol the Earth and keep track on of psychic ability. They're looking for people to recruit. In other words, if you remote view the moon, that they are set up to defend such, so that you don't review. So if you're an adept psychic that can do very good remote viewing, like one of the greats, that and you try to remote view how to build a spaceship that is parked on the moon in one of these hangar bays, that there's teams of very psychic ETs that block that they block it. So paranormal activity in space is very common. Once they get advanced, like this is how they're doing. They fly up along other ships and scan it physically, infrared, and then have psychics scan it and remote view the other ship too, to see if they can acquire their tech or if they're outgunned or whatever, or their intention, even their intention. So there's that. As far as the interdimensional aspect of it, I don't think that it's 100% ET, um, but they live in the same world we do. So they die and become a soul the same way that we do, hopefully. And so I think that some of it is absolutely connected, but not all of it.
I'm curious to one thing I asked of Brad Olson when he was on the show that I'm interested too to see your perspective is the Space Force. When Trump announced we have a Space Force, do you feel like that was his attempt to disclose that yes, we are in space and yes, we do have fleets of ships, so whatever Project Bluebeam was trying to do would be null and voided.
I think the Space Force is a very positive thing. I think that the recent, I don't know if you followed the congressional hearings on the the UAP phenomenon. David Grouch, if I'm saying his name right, I hope I am. These guys are absolute heroes that are up there risking their lives for this. Been death threats going around behind the scenes for these guys that are testifying of this F-18 footage of the Tic Tac video. If it wasn't for Space Force, those hearings wouldn't have happened. That wouldn't have happened. That is a direct result of Space Force trying to consolidate the United States space assets that are owned by the NRO and the CIA, NASA, and all this. They're trying to consolidate all of the assets of space, specifically all the satellite network, military satellite network, and, as he said, downed spacecraft that have been reverse engineered, and biologicals that have been reverse engineered. These are things that individual corporations behind black security have sequestered, and they don't want to give us the technology. So now Space Force comes along and says, now we have eminent domain over that. That's the bill that's on up for it. And Space Force says, this is something, now that we're we're in charge of the military of space. We're defending the United States in space. So we need to sequester all of the technology that you corporations have been holding in charging us to have access to. And so that's what that is. We're seeing a battle. These guys have, so they're going to uncover literally trillions of dollars of infrastructure from these corporations. So it's not the United States. It's not one entity. It's these corporate entities that exist in the secret space program and that make up the bulk of the technology that's been withheld from humanity. And so now the Space Force is a governmental agency that's attempting to seize this back in the name of the taxpayer, not the individual that has security clearance. So these corporations have clearance above the president. The president can't even go to Lockheed Martin and say, what do you got behind the door there? So now Space Force is doing that. There's a great book Dr. Sala wrote on Space Force, and it gives the history and the budget, how the money, he followed the money trail. And the CIA has been solely responsible for hiding the AT phenomenon and the existence of a space infrastructure from the public for a very long, since the 70s, as early as the 70s.
Right. And so, since they're consolidating everything, do you think that the secret space program will become no longer secret and become dissolved? Or do you think this will still occur, but just under the purview of the Space Force?
These are great questions for Dr. Sala, who I'd recommend any of you look at Exopolitics. But no, they're not going to dissolve the colonies as they exist. In fact, we're seeing legislation, the Artemis Accords, legislate and make it available legally for these colonies to exist. So, however they want to spoon feed it to the public it remains to be seen. But it's perfectly legal now to have a colony that operates independently of Earth in the name of mining the asteroid belt, for instance. So the Artemis Accords made this possible. And what they're doing is kind of writing the story so that they can slowly either disclose and say this is what exists. It'd be great if they had pardon my language, if they had the balls to do that. It'd be great. It would save us all a lot of time and trouble. But they're going to disclose. They're going to tell us what's going on. I don't think they're going to dissolve anything. I think they're just going to have to accept how it is and kind of put a spin on it so that people can swallow it better than if we told everybody what the situation was today. So there's going to be a lot of reckoning. I think the biggest problem is that, by and large, the individual human on this planet has been greatly lied to and programmed to believe a certain set of beliefs so that they could be pointed in a direction and let go and say, go and hate those people. So I think there's a lot of that. So it's a control mechanism. They programmed us for literally the whole time. So the elites have been programming us to believe certain things the entire time, not just since the television was invented or the radio. It's been all along. And so rather than unprogram it, they're trying to kind of spin it into a way that they can believe. One example is that when you tell somebody right now, if you go to the campfire and say, I saw a UFO, the wall is going to come up of you're crazy and that's laughable. Now they rebrand because we've been subconsciously programmed our whole life to laugh at ufology, to laugh at the term UFO. So instead of saying now we have this Tic Tac UFO on camera, now they've rebranded it and they say now it's a UAP, and you can say at the same campfire, I believe I saw a UAP, and people go, really? What did it look like? They take you seriously because they haven't been programmed to laugh at it. We've all been programmed greatly. People are programmable. We are programmed. We have been mind altered to believe certain things, and nowadays worse than ever. Some people see now that they have tailored specific media for you on your phone and on your internet. Now your suggested thing that comes up to play next is tailor made to make you believe according to your profile what they want you to believe, because you're not susceptible to what the next guy's gonna. So you know what I mean? Like it's not just television commercials that are making you hate the Russians, or television that's they programmed us to hate the Russians for a long time. And
Right.
now it's not like that. Now they have individual programming, and we're seeing it really badly in our kids these days. So I'm on a whole different tangent, and that's not. I don't want to get into politics or anything like that. But what I'm saying is they're rebranding it rather than unprogramming it.
That makes sense actually, because that seems to be the growing trend of when something hits a certain point and the media backlash is too much, they just reintroduce it under another name and everyone's like, "Oh great, this is out." And
It's the
it's like,
status quo. Yeah.
"Don't you get it's the same thing?"
Same thing with a new brand, with a rebrand. We fall for it. But the average person has too much on their plate to keep track of the big things going on.
Right.
Most people have too much going on to take care of their yard. Love them. I love the metaphor. Most people have too hard of a time taking care of their own yard to worry about the volcano in the distance. They just don't. They just, you know what I mean? And which is good, because the volcano is going to do what it's going to do when it's going to do it. You don't really have a say in it. It doesn't do you any good.
Right. It's not
Uh,
like you could have put up a barrier that's
you're not going to
prevents lava from coming in. It's like, does it exist?
you can't stop the volcano from going on, from coming on. So but you can take care of your own yard. And a lot of things fall into that. It's sad. We should have more power. We should have more say and more power into what's going on. This is our tax dollars that funded these programs, and these guys that are running it are doing horrible satanic rituals, and they're hurting people. It really is dark what how this technology has been used. And I always say this: if your leaders aren't behaving, if your leaders are passing laws and doing things that are inhumane, maybe they're not even human. Maybe that's where this stuff's coming from, is not even human. If it's an
Right.
inhumane policy, maybe it's not a human that's creating the policy.
Right. And I want to take a moment and shift gears real quick, because I know when you talk about being on the ship and being in the cargo hold, I'm sure you got hurt or, bad things happen, because I'm sure accidents happened in space. Did you have access to like med beds where they would patch you up, or what
I
would
was
they do?
I was hurt very badly on two occasions. Once on Mars, and I had an arm severed and a foot below the ankle, and I lost a lot of blood, and they were keeping me awake uh, till they got me back to base. And as soon as we saw the doors, I remember seeing the doors to the base, and I said, "Look, you got to let me sleep." And he kept slapping me. A soldier carried me out. He kept slapping me in the face, and to keep me awake, he said, "Don't go to sleep. If you go to sleep, you're going to die." I'd lost a lot of blood. They put tourniquets on me, and as soon as I saw the doors to the base, he let me go to sleep. He said, "Okay." And I passed out. And when I woke up the next morning, I had my arm and my foot back, and I felt like $1,000,000. And I had a long-term injury in my shoulder. I had been dislocated. I had a dislocated shoulder in the first year of my time after I was taken. They dislocated my shoulder, and so it would happen again. Sometimes even when I was sleeping, it would dislocate, and it hurt. And after that instance, it never happened again. I never had a dislocated shoulder again. So that was one time. Another time on a ship, I was badly burnt. There was like radioactive steam that burnt me. But I was caught in a pipe, and I got third-degree burns. I was burnt very badly. My hand was burnt very badly. My face was burnt. I was disfigured, and that was again the same thing. I was freezing when after they pulled me out of the pipe. I remember shivering, my teeth chattering because I was freezing. And I waited there on the floor. They kept me on the floor, and a bunch of people came in, and they were looking at me thinking, "You poor bastard," is what they were saying. And they took me out on a stretcher, and I remember again losing they put me on a table, losing consciousness, and when I woke up, I was back to normal. I was in great shape. My face was back, everything, and it was overnight. It was an over seemingly. I don't know how long. To be fair, I don't know how long it was, but it felt like it was just overnight. It felt like I went to sleep and I woke up and I was fine. And so I didn't witness the process or what. And when I asked, and I did inquire, how'd you guys do that? They said, "Don't worry about it. It was classified to me." They said, don't worry about it. Just don't do that again," kind of thing.
Which is incredible because you would think, if it's technology to be used, that you would be readily available to everybody, not a, hey, let's try to keep your usage of this to a minimal.
That's how they were. They said they treated it like it was expensive, for one. To answer Andy's question, they did not reconnect them. It must have been regrown. So they didn't even bring my parts back. I guarantee that it wasn't the same ones. Like I said, I had a different injury in my shoulder that also went away. So I believe that the technology for fixing me in my case was centered around cloning, human cloning, and I believe that again, this is what I remember in my testimony. The very first thing they said to me was, "We want to." Back when I was abducted and I was originally in a laboratory, and I was like first contact blown away that I'm in a room with ETs. And the first thing they said to me is, it wasn't the first thing, but what they said was, "We want to borrow your consciousness." That's verbatim what they said. "We want to borrow your consciousness to work for us, to help us." That was how they put it. They had to get me to consent, and I did. I had no idea what I was in for. So I think that they have a method of cloning somebody quickly, and then taking the consciousness out of somebody and putting it into the clone, and then putting it back. The other thing that lends credence to that is that I woke up. So I was taken out of my bed in 1982 in Michigan, and I was in a laboratory with ETs, Greys, and a reptilian working on me. And then when it began, they said, "Okay." When I gave them, they did a test. They did a genetic test on me. It took like 20 minutes, 20 or 30 minutes. And they said, when the test came back, they said, "Yeah, just barely. He's got the genetics. He can go." And then they said, "We want to borrow your consciousness." And he explained the whole thing to me, talked me into it. I said, "Yes." And they put me on a table and they did a procedure. And when I woke up, I was in California. I was on the ground in California with humans and a human doctor. And I had no memory of where I came from. I had no memory of my mom or my dad or my home in Michigan. I was complete amnesia. Then I lived for the whole 20 years. I went from Inyokern to Seattle. Inyokern, excuse me, the first trip to the moon, then back to Inyokern, then to Seattle, then to Peru for 2 years, then back to Seattle for 2 years, then sold into the space program. Um, at the end of all that, there was another procedure, and then I woke up back in my 10-year-old body with no memory of that 20 years of Peru or Inyokern or space. All those memories were gone, but I had all the memories back of Michigan and my life, my mom and dad. So what I'm saying is, it was like they took me out of my body, put me in a new body, and then that lived. And when it came back and they put me back, those memories were waiting for me. So if you understand, like, it's a hunch. I don't know for sure. I'm only explaining what the experience was like. I'll say right now, I have no idea if that's true or not, if that's what happened, but it felt like that. So because the memories were there, it was easy. I had all the
Right.
memories back again.
It makes sense when you think about it. If, like you point out how programmable we are, that they can download our memories and everything, who we are, and then just upload it when they're ready to
I hope it's not
return.
that easy, because that calls a lot of things into question. I think that, well, especially if you got to think, if I had no memory for all those years, and then when was that? 2015, from 82, 33 years later, I got my memories back. That's when all the memories came, and I remember both instances now. Both the whole timeline all in one.
Right. And Andy's asking if that's similar to what happened with the Philadelphia experiment. And I think isn't that considered Montauk, which would be MK Ultra's domain?
So the Montauk, as far as I'm aware, was a chair that was recovered from a craft, and they found out that it lended astral travel, kind of like what was the show Quantum Leap, and that only kids could use it. So they were abducting children and putting them in this chair, and they were living lifetimes of whether they could jump into another life and live it. So, and they were trying to alter the timeline and get information. They were trying to use it for recon, etc. So that's what I think the Montauk, the Philadelphia experiment was trying to make a render a ship like a destroyer invisible to radar. So I don't think it had anything to do with conscious experiment. So I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure, Andy. I'm not really versed in the Philadelphia experiment or the Montauk project, to be honest.
So I'm also a little curious because, like Andy was talking about with the paranormal, that when we use the term doppelganger, our opposites, do you think that maybe they're using one of our clones to do something, and we just happen to really see ourselves?
I don't know. So it's so when I think about my testimony in the years that I was in Seattle, for instance, I was maybe 13 to 15. So I was also in Michigan in southern Michigan in 13 to 15 as well. And I know that it wasn't some alternate timeline or in the future or the past because I had access to music and we had television and it was the exact same music. Like when I got back and I got my memory, well, not even when I got my memory, when I got back, there were songs that came on the radio. So I experienced my life from 0 to 10 years old. Then I experienced the 20 years in space that time and then went back. So that's how the line looks for me. So 0 to 10, then lived till 30 with that time and space. And then I went back to 10 and I lived it. The second time that I was in the 80s, for instance, when songs would come out, I would think that they were very old. I remember there was an Aerosmith song. I'm not sure which one. I can't tell you the name of it. That came out in like 86, maybe later. And I was riding down the road with my brother when it came out, my older brother. And I said, and he said, yeah, I'm turning this up. It just came out. And I said, this is an old song. This song's been out for like 20 years. What are you talking about? He said, no, this is just this week it came out. He's like, this is brand new. But for me, it was 20 years ago. It was more greater than 20 years. So you understand, I went through that kind of sensation a lot. And so I forget how the question goes. At the time, I could have met. So when I was 15, I could have went to the Seattle area and bumped into myself, and it would have been me. I looked exactly like me. I was the same person. So yes, so there was two of me. Um, Another thing that seems to be a phenomenon, not only what I remember going through myself, but many other people have told me. Uh, and when you start asking them, looking for common denominators of people that go through a 20-year tour, um, with these programs being abducted and basically having two of you, is that before it began, I was a straight A student. I kind of had my act together. I was very astute and I was a hardworking kid. And when I came back, I went to D's and E's immediately and withdrew from life. I was badly emotionally damaged, but my whole life took a turn and I lived kind of I don't want to say it, I don't want to put a label on it, but I lived a kind of a lesser existence, I got to think, than what I had been living to that point. At the end of the 20 years, there was a day when I woke up in Michigan, and I woke up one morning and I went, "It's over." I kept saying it over and over again. "It's over. It's over." And I felt like $1 million. I immediately cleaned my room and I had a van. I had an old junky van at the time. I cleaned the van up. I said, "Man, I can't drive this. I got to get something better than this." And within 6 months, met my wife. I couldn't keep a relationship. I was very, very emotionally damaged, and so dating me, I was a crazy to date. And it was 6 months or so after that day that I woke up and I met my wife. Stayed with her 23 years, and so I was better. In other words, when there were two of me, it was as if my mental ability was diluted. There was lesser. Mentally I was lesser. Then when the other one died, when that one was finished, it was like I got my mental ability back. And that's something that other people that I've worked with kind of unknowingly have confirmed going through themselves.
Which, in a way, I know for you it was hard, but for somebody that's going through it, kind of it's like a light at the end of the tunnel is the clones have an expiration date. So we don't have to go, okay, it's probably been 20 years since I've done my 20 and back. Are my clones still valid? And are they
Is he
going to
still
come?
alive? Yeah. Is he still alive?
So, yeah, so there's kind of a little bit of peace that comes with knowing that, yeah, they have an expiration date too.
Yeah, it's something I look for when I deal with people. When people get a hold of me for consults, they just want to talk about it. It's hard to find anybody to talk to about this stuff. Most people have a spouse that doesn't want to hear it, doesn't want to hear your alien abduction story. Most of the people, it's a blessing when they have a spouse that um, really entertains it and can talk, and they can talk, because talking about it is how you unpack it, and therapy.
Right. And on the flip side of that too is like my parents always like I'll slowly drop tidbits through like this show and everything. They're like, "Why didn't you ever tell us?" And it's like it's hard to tell somebody it too. Is to go, open up about it and say, "Yeah, I had experience of this, this, and this."
Well, and then the other thing is, you're always going to have the stigma. So somebody that's kind of in uh, dir- what's the word? Not interested in it. And I don't even want to say skeptical, but you're always going to have the stigma where they go, I don't know, is there something else wrong with you? And you're always constantly proving it. And a lot of people don't have enough memory to come up. A lot of people don't have enough memory to defend themselves against a skeptical person. So it's just way easier. It's way easier to defend, like I said, to not bulldoze reality. So it's way
Right.
easier to just follow reality and say that your account is just you have a psychosis, or you have some schizophrenia, or you dreamt it. This is a big dream. Don't forget about it. So it's way easier to shoot giant holes in it. And most people don't have the amount of memory. I was blessed in my regard. It was 30 years later after the fact. I got my memories back, and I was able to find things. I was able to have the time on Earth. A lot of people are taken straight to space, and so they can't go and say, look, well, here's a look at how do you explain that I know my way around Seattle? How do I know my way around California and Peru? How can I know that? So people don't have that luxury of shooting holes back in and saying, I'm not bulldozing reality. I'm explaining a reality, and you need to explain how that happened. And so the consensus is always, like I said, if you saw a craft going 40,000 miles an hour and it turned a right angle, science would tell you that you didn't see it. You're bulldozing reality. You're bulldozing reality to fit your narrative, something you think you saw. But
Right.
now that is reality. Now it is the reality. We have it on video, and the Congress admits it. There's UAPs, there's a task force, and etc. So it is reality now. It's the same thing with having a gray in your living room. We're going to figure that out soon.
And I know your time is valuable, and we are a little bit over our hour.
No
And
worries.
do you have time for at least one more question?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Two more.
So Andy's asking, how do you know you are you?
Well, do we? Does anybody? Right. So I got to think that I am. I think that I'm somebody that went through a version of this. So I think there are tiers of consciousness, and maybe it goes by genetics, maybe it goes by intelligence. Who knows? Really, I don't know. I think that I was somebody that was not cut out for the program that I went through, and I wasn't meant to go into any of the programs, to be honest. But they put me through the lower tier of it, the prisoner tier version, where I was treated like a prisoner, I was slave labor. And As a result, at the end of it, they just put me back. They botched it. They bungled a lot of the procedures, and they said this. Oh well, we and then they lost my record too. So um, they just put me back. They said just forget it, put him back, and they botched it. And so somebody else that was on a professional level that got their memories back, that had their records in play, would have been treated differently. Like I would have been abducted and re erased or something else. And so that's how I think I'm me. That
Right.
I think that I was just meant for a lower thing, and I'm just fortunate to slightly have stayed one step ahead of it and got my memories back. And maybe had some help. So the bulk of the second book, which is more spiritual than factual, than concrete or physical, spiritual, and doesn't have. So this, I'll say, I'm the first to say, Project Star Maker. I have very little evidence. Series Colony Cavalier, I have supporting evidence. I have evidence in Peru. I have evidence in Seattle, California, and on Series, places that I called out on Series before, and then NASA Proof 4 years later. So that's evidence. There's no way that I could have faked that. Project Star Maker, I don't have that. It's a spiritual account, and I'm the first one to say I have no proof, and it's a very distant, very vague memory. But it's the sequel. It's the next bit that I could remember. People were crying for the first book. Did really good, and I was shocked actually. And it's got a lot of great reviews. An extremely brilliant person named Jackie Kenner, who's a psychic medium. She does readings, but she's like super brilliant. She was the editor and really the secret sauce on the book, so it's very readable. People read it very quick because she wrote it in a way that's very direct and not super descriptive. But she's way smarter than me, and she edited the book, did a great job. So, am I done? I think I answered that question as best I could.
Right. And so, last question is we talked about Hollywood disclosing little bits because, some of the people wanted or were maybe supposed to disclose. I'm wondering if that's why, like, for me, example is I remember being a knight in space fighting with, yeah, lightsabers, so to speak, and then seeing, and I would told my parents that, yeah, when it was over, we gave up, we buried our weapons in the dirt and walked away. Then I see like decades later, or at least a decade later, Star Wars comes out with the last of the Skywalker trilogy, and the last scene is Rey burying the lightsabers in the sand, and I had a tear coming down my eye, and I said, "That's what it was. That's what we did."
Hmm.
Is that Hollywood's way of trying to like tap the memory and saying, "Hey, remember this"?
So, so there's a couple. I have a couple theories on that. Um, I'm gonna try to explain this the best I can and be quick about it. So I know we're getting on the end, but I don't mind explaining the theory. I've done a lot of research on the project I was in. So my very first stop on Enya Kern was an offshoot. It was an trauma-based mind control, like an MK Ultra. We were kids, and we were put through this trauma, and then we were put through a psychic program, like a remote viewing, like an industrial grade remote viewing and remote influencing program. I had very specific memories of what we went through. And then as I researched it, so I'm always looking to research my memories to prove, obviously, what I went through. And as I researched it, I dug up material on the CIA class declassifiedlibrary.gov. So the declassified things. I went in there and I was looking for the place, and then I found out that the funding from the program I was in was an offshoot of Project Grill Flame. And then I started researching the techniques and the things, and lo and behold, there's a lot of info on the psychic ability that they were going on. There's a remote viewing. I teach a remote viewing class now. It's grown to that, and a remote influencing class through my Patreon. Uh, but what I learned is that people we communicate. So when I start researching the science of psychic ability, there seems to be a phenomenon where when we're sleeping and we're in the theta state, we're all communicating with each other on a certain level, like a, I don't want to say like a hive mind, but we all do communicate and we get permission for what's about to happen in the future. So when you're in a theta state, you have access to the past and the future, and distance isn't, you have access to those things. And as a consciousness, we meet people. So you're going to meet somebody in a week or get in a car crash. You will contact them slightly in a theta state. So you have access, and it's a very honest state. So there's no secrets, but you honor the secret, right? Um, so as we went into space, as the secret space program happened, we made contact with ETs, built spaceships, and went into space. Our subconscious couldn't maintain the lie. So people could subconsciously, in that theta state, see that there was somebody on the moon, because distance doesn't, or on another planet, even in another star system, that Johnny from next door was in another star system. And you're in a theta state, seeing there, accessing that and talking to him and going, what's going on? And where, like I said, there's no secret. So they had to off gas that pressure. So sooner or later, the mass consciousness would say, we need to know what's going on. You need to tell us. So instead, what Johnny's seeing on that other planet, they make a movie about it, and the subconscious mind doesn't know the difference between fiction and nonfiction. That theta state mind doesn't know the difference, so they go, "Oh, it was just a movie. Johnny was in a desert fighting giant bugs, so it was Starship Troopers, or it was Flash Gordon. It was Flash." They've been doing it the whole time. So sci-fi movies have happened the entire time. So you look back in the 30s, science fiction was here, and then it just skyrocket went up because
Right.
they were feeding us, they were off gassing that subconscious fact so that the collective of humanity wouldn't manifest discovering the programs. So it's part of the secrecy. Once they got access to, well, they probably had great advances in consciousness technology all along, all through history, from Egyptian times. Like, they know how the mankind works, and the elite have been manipulating that theta state the whole time. But after they got into space, they had the benefit of ETs telling them how to do. You need to go down and make movies with fiction so that people subconsciously don't know the difference. Otherwise, they're going to come looking for where these spaceships are parked, because you would just kind of be drawn to it. So it's a way of, it's another version of camouflage, if that makes sense.
Right. And I know you said two questions, but we kind of hinted on this one.
Sure,
And
come on.
so, Nickname is asking you, why do you think we have lost our natural psychic abilities?
Well, we haven't. We absolutely have not. So I have a remote viewing class, a group, and it's on Patreon. It's actually pretty good. I stumbled into it from, we did something called the Purple Series, and that's on my website. It's like whatever, $40, and it teaches you how to do remote influencing. But during that, so I started a group of tier 3 on my Talks with Tony, and we meet every Tuesday, and we do synchronized remote influencing. And as an exercise, we started doing remote viewing just as for kicks. I would write down, I'd hide something in a bucket, and we'd try to meditate and find out. Um, oh wow, a lot of people put my website right there. Thank
Oh,
you.
I just did that. So
Thank you for that. I would put an item in a bucket, and people would try to remote view and see what was in the bucket. And a few people would get it. Sometimes, well, one time was a stuffed animal, and a girl drew it almost verbatim. But the people that weren't getting it were getting items that were in the room next to it. Exactly. They were writing, I see it. It's weird. I see some snow boots. And the bucket was right next to my snow boots. So it was more than coincidence. I went, whoa. And I looked into it, and I learned, read up on remote viewing. Now I have a class. What I want to say is that every single week, 100% of the time, we beat the odds of better than 1 in 250,000. There's a scoring system I came up with. We beat the odds on remote viewing. Some of them are scary. Some of them are freakishly accurate, and it's a blind thing. Like, it's a set of numbers on an envelope. I write things down and put a picture in an envelope, and it's absolutely blind. And it could be a microbe, it could be a planet, it could be my office, it could be somewhere that I've been on vacation, it could be somewhere that somebody else, a wedding, a ceremony. It doesn't matter. It's a completely blind thing, and we beat the odds every single week, 100% of the time. Psychic abilities there. There is a penalty to eating junk food and being drunk and eating candy. There's a penalty to pay. And they've poisoned us. They don't want us. I don't know 100% for sure, but the story is that the Germans, the society with the girls with the long hair, the Vril Society, were channeling the information and spoke to ETs on another planet that gave them what is that called, ghost writing or spirit writing, that she wrote in Sumerian the plans for an anti-grav motor, and it ended up at the University of Munich or Berlin, and back in the 20s, and they built a spaceship, and that's how they got into space first, was that they channeled it. So then after that happened, that's when they came with the fluoride in the water and added chemicals to slam the door so that nobody else channeled the ability to get into space.
Right.
And so we've been definitely led astray from our physical abilities and our mental. And then the other thing, there's a giggle factor. So if you say you're a psychic, again, that's going to have to be rebranded. It's going to have to be called gifted, or they're going to make a new name for it, because the National Enquirer made you laugh at being psychic. You always see the girl, the rip off girl with the crystal ball. So they're very good at adding information that makes you immediately believe, just on first glance, make you categorize things. Oh, those people are all scammers. We are very psychic. Most people just don't believe they can. But if you worked at it every day, like the remote view group, there are people that have joined the remote view group that just want to watch. And they tell me I can't do this. I'm telling you, I've had more than one person come in the group and they say, I'm not going to be able to do this, Tony. And I go, well, don't discount yourself. They go, well, I'm not healthy. I like to drink and whatever. And I don't sleep very much. I don't sleep well. And they try it and they don't get the target. They get a low score. But after a while of trying it, they start hitting the target. So even the people that have the lowest scores in the very beginning get those. I have a scale of like basically 0 to 35, and once you cross the 15 threshold, it's better than 1 in 250,000. It's very improbable that you would get a 15. And so when somebody's consistently in fives and tens, it's like vaguely could have been the target. When they hit 15, there's no way you can get a 15. The target's blind. It's just not possible. So you are remote viewing at that point. And I think our high score is like 22.7. So very, very, very accurate at that point of remote viewing. So our psychic abilities are real. There are telepathy classes you can do. I would say go look at the Farsight Institute's info, and you can check out my talks with Tony. But it's monetized, so I got attacked publicly. I got deleted. A lot of YouTubes got taken down. People attack me, so I hide behind a paywall, so I don't get trolls in there. And it's what I do for a living. I'm quite active in it. I spend, 15, 20 hours a week at it, talking on it on a camera. And it's great. It's a great bunch of people. So that's a great question to also nickname. Thank you for that.
Right. And so, where can people, I mean, obviously, TonyRodrigues.com, your
Uh,
website, are there other places they can find you?
I've been dying to kind of work the YouTube thing, but I stay pretty busy. I'm working on a learning company. So I remember how they taught me how the software worked when I was being trained to do ship maintenance on Mars. I remember how the software worked. And so now I have a company, Maple Street Learning Incorporated, that we're trying to reverse engineer that way that software worked. And it's making leaps and bounds, very promising. So I'm working on that. I am doing the groups thing, and I run a company. I'm actually a tradesman. I'm a floor refinisher by trade, and I have a floor company. So I'm busy. But TonyRodrigues.com has links to the books. I'm going to show the books. Here's the Project Star Maker. I've held that. It's a little book, but it's a great companion. It's dense. People read it 2 or 3 times because it's confusing on purpose. And then Series Colony Cavalier is a fast read, but it's a good sized book, and it tells the whole story from start to end. And I'll be working on another book that's kind of going to be about what it's about, what it was like to remember, and then talk about it on shows like this. And who knows? I got a couple other little books like timeline work that's going to come out. What I do with people in consults. But TonyRodrigues.com, and I'm on Facebook. So that's originally that's how I did everything. I just talked to people on Facebook, but it's like maxed out at 5,000 people. Like I can't add friends, and there's like 1,000 people waiting to be friends on there. So I don't Facebook as much anymore. I've been hacked heavily. People hack me and spy on my phone, spy on my computer all the time. So I don't click links as much as I used to, and I'm just not as active. But I check my messages on there, so that's a good way to get hold of me. you can also email me at tonyrodrigues.com. There's a link to contact me there. So that's it.
Okay. Well, thank you for coming on. I truly enjoyed getting to know you better and to hear of your experiences.
I tell you what, the information is clearly under attack right now. There is a power struggle, like we talked about earlier. We touched on earlier about the Space Force and the military industrial There is a struggle for who's going to be informed and in what way, and who's going to be in charge. And so they are really trying to sweep this information under the rug.
Right.
And sorry, I'm reading these. They are trying to sweep the information under the rug, definitely. But it's real. Sadly, there is life on Mars. There are people there. The Mars Colony Corporation is real. The Ceres Colony Corporation is real. And we are living in a very watered down version of technology that we should have far more technology in what we do. So I think people should just kind of, take the moral high ground and work on morality of being a better neighbor and a better person. And that's the best we can do before disclosure happens. Think about what kind of person, if you were an ET, what kind of world would you want to visit? And let's make our world that way. So that's that.
Awesome. And just so you know, Andy Decodes, he's my friend in the UK. He has a podcast show as well. And he's doing interviews. Like we actually were talking with Laura Eisenhower yesterday.
Cool.
And so, yeah, I think he's wanting to offer you time to come on his show.
I'd be honored.
So, Andy, go to his, probably the easiest way would be go to your website and email you, because Facebook is getting iffy sometimes.
Yeah, Facebook's a little, you can try me there too, but yeah, you can definitely email me.
Okay. Well, like I said, I appreciate you coming on, and you're welcome anytime you'd like to come on and promote anything. And I will say, for anybody, if they get the chance to go into Florida next month, you're speaking at the GSIC, correct?
Yes, it's a pretty big good conference there, big conference. And that's a great lineup. The people are there. The vibe is really high. I've been to visit. I went back to Seattle and I got some footage there. I'm not going to include a lot of it, most of it, but just a few clips. I've been working really hard. I really want to put my best foot forward for this GSIC. I'm going to talk about the new technology. I'm going to talk about the new book, because Star Maker came out in the last year. And I'm sure that I think I get an hour, a little bit better, an hour, maybe 90 minutes. I know the presentation is going to be a blink of an eye to me, but GSIC was life-changing to me. And that conference is the closest thing to the ETs we're going to get right now. So it's a great show. It's a great show to be to. And it's in beautiful Orlando there, a great spot in Florida at the DoubleTree. So yeah, please come on down to that. It's worth it. It's an expensive show, but it's worth every penny because it's the best one.
Yeah. So thank you again for coming on. Thank you to everyone in the chat room. We are going to call it a show because I know you have other things to do. So thank you to everyone. So wherever you are in the world, have a great morning, great day, and a great evening. So bye-bye, everyone.